War pirates, yes, they're rabbi, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit, my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation.
Western world that if you just show up, you're considered a serious citizen.
Won't you help?
And half of democracy is showing up. It's showing up at meetings and marches and demonstrations and rallies and courtrooms and town council rooms. And if we can own our children to these kinds of civic experiences, they might find a higher level of gratification in their life. They might have a higher estimate of their own significance to make a difference. So this evening I look forward to very much. Over the years, in our consumer environmental work, we always look for the best practices of certain singular companies, because if we can find one company that does something right and the rest of the industry doesn't, that's the most credible argument we can make before public officials or Congress or the media. And when I started taking on General Motors as a young man, I'd lost a lot of my friends on the highway in high school and college. Many killed, injured. It was the first leading cause of death between the ages of 5 and 24. And General Motors was very stubborn. They subordinated engineering integrity for stylistic pornography and horsepower. And so we tried to push them to put seatbelts in cars, and then the three-point belt. And we would show the Pentagon funded research in crash protection, because they were losing more Air Force people on the roads in the United States than in the Korean War. And I found that the arguments wouldn't hold. I would go to these technical meetings and the General Motors engineer would say, don't you know, Mr. Nader, in front of all the other people, he said, don't you know that seatbelts kill people? Because if you decelerate suddenly, the G-forces tear out your inner organs, your kidneys and lungs and liver. It's almost amazing and grotesque to even recall the way they behave. So I learned that Volvo had three-point belts in the 1950s here, way ahead of the U.S. auto companies. And the record was quite impressive in saving lives on the highway here. So I hurled the Volvo experience at General Motors, and that you always have to associate satire with empirical evidence when it comes to General Motors, which progresses by going backwards into the future. And so I said, now here's the evidence from the Swedish statistics. Here's the device, the safety device, the three-point belt. And could you please explain, if you don't accept this evidence and install these belts in your car, the difference between the anatomy of the Swede and the anatomy of the American? So we're always looking for best practices. It's nice to be here with Craft and Culture, which, as you know, sells renewable energy, but also knows that you have to have a cultural revolution in order to liberate people from the myths of free market corporate capitalism and World Trade Organization corporate managed trade, and the kind of technological stagnation that has been very profitable for large companies which dominate market share. And in looking for these best practices in the United States, we came across a spectacular company called Interface Corporation. It's interfacecorp.com, I-N-T-E-R-F-A-C-E. It's the largest tile carpet manufacturer in the country, and it has 6 factories abroad. And in 1995, the CEO, Ray Anderson, had a sort of epiphany after listening to a lecture by industrialist on industrial ecology, Paul Hawking. And he came back to the company and he assembled his managers and he said, we are going to go for zero pollution and 100% recycling with our carpets. And they looked at him as if he was engaged in delirious alcoholism. And he said, and this is the way we're going to do it, year by year. We will do it and justify it by reducing our expenses and increasing our profits and increasing the gratification of working in the company. And the idea almost seems preposterous because it's like an absolute zero pollution, 100% recycling. How do you do that with tens of thousands of customers who have these carpets in their offices and in their hotels? But how he did it and how he is beginning to do it. One way is he developed a material called selenium, which is extremely effective in terms of its environmental linkage and very efficient, and one that has put his company in a very high competitive position. It has better qualities, it's stain-proof, it's easily recyclable, it's very tough wearing, and it just has so many superior features, and they developed it in the company. So his idea eventually is to lease carpets, where they lease the carpets, they maintain the carpets, and when the carpets are worn out, they collect them and then remanufacture them. Now, what's interesting is, this is not a small company. This is a fairly mid-sized company. They're meeting a payroll, as the saying goes. And the question is, why don't these practices diffuse faster? Why don't they diffuse faster? Why don't they push the larger companies into a more effective posture? And there's no one answer to that. These companies are hierarchical, they're bureaucratic, they're led by short-sighted, overpaid executives who are looking forward to retirement. They are surrounded by sycophants. That's how you are promoted in General Motors. You first become first-class sycophant to the superior as you go up. And by the way, there are 18 stages of decision-making from the shop floor to General Motors headquarters before GM would make a decision. 18 layers like that. You can see how easy it was to take it on in Washington because they couldn't turn around as fast as we went after them. So it worked well from our point of view, but not from the point of view of the economy or the motorists. So I think the first thing I'd like to do quickly is to develop certain concepts that will help us analyze multinational corporate behavior, which is the dominant model. There is no countervailing model in socialist capitalism, and there is no dominant, challenging model of whatever poor or good quality on the global stage. There are a lot of smaller companies that are showing the way. There are social entrepreneurs. There are a lot of good ideas in the third world which never get publicity except other than, say, the Grameen Bank and micro